Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fantastic episode of TARTLEcast. Thank you again for joining us all over the world. We have a very special guest here today, Susanne Tedrick. She is absolutely one of a kind. She is a champion for women of color in tech. And on top of that, she's a Microsoft cloud specialist, and I believe that's Azure. Is that how you say that?
Yep, that's right.
Okay. And before I even deep dive into this, there's a lot of information about her online and things of that nature. Can you please give us a brief synopsis about yourself, what you are championing, and then we can deep dive into that here on the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, I am a cloud specialist for Azure. I also do a lot of work for diversity and inclusion in the tech industry. I'm heavily involved with CompTIA, which is a professional organization that helps others advance their careers in information technology. And I serve on their Advancing Tech Talent and Diversity Council. I'm also the author of the book Women of Color in Tech, which is a book that is hopefully out there to help inform and inspire women of color to pursue tech careers.
No, I see. Now, here's an interesting point here. First of all, I don't know if I had the attention span to write a book. So kudos to you for doing that. Okay. And the other aspect of this, you said, hopefully, that this inspires. I have to say that you are a walking book within yourself. Okay. You lead by example. You know, there's a lot of people that write books in a philosophical sense or self-help or whatever that might be, where they try and bridge the gap, whether it is an issue, on human rights or, anything of that point, but they're not actually out there living it. You have taken the route through your life. First of all, you're a nerd, 100%. If you're into Final Fantasy, you're 100% a nerd. It's one of the greatest genres that ever hit Sony, right? For their gaming. So, I mean, shout out to you with that. And then at the same time, it's like, well, how do I balance out my nerd-like abilities? I should probably go run marathons, right? And then you're doing that, and you're supporting the aspects of your mother, and then you're like, how do I then be altruistic with this? How do I put it towards, brain tumor research or anything that, falls into that category? And then among that, you go to school, you say, I want to take the STEM path. I am a human being like anyone else. This is not just for specific 6'5" white male individuals like the two of us in here. And by the way, I didn't do STEM. I didn't have the capacity for it.
No, yeah, me neither.
Yeah, of course not. But you take that path, you begin that learning, through a path, a professional career, you find yourself at Microsoft. And then as you're going through here, you're saying, well, look at the benefits that have happened in my life. Look at the amount of gains and the balance and the equilibrium struck in society that I can use myself as an example, share that here on a podcast, share that through my book of Women in Color in Tech, share that through the CompTIA, that not-for-profit that I'm an executive counsel for. That is the aspect of not living that life of a hypocrite. And I was dreaming about this last night. When you walk that life, you are really putting your money where your mouth is and having that example and saying, I am that example. There's so much assurance in what you do. So there's not a hope that you're actually inspiring people. You're an inspiration to yourself and anyone that actually has the ability to come and meet you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that truly touches me. And I've always been of the mindset that a lot of people have helped me to get where I am and be successful. And I do everything that I possibly can to help pay that forward. And so that when other women of color come into the field, they're not scraping their knees as much. They don't feel as alienated. They don't feel quite as alone. And then that they know that they have resources. And I think for myself, I can't possibly ask anyone else to kind of walk the walk and talk the talk if I'm not willing to put myself out there myself and do the hard work that is, diversity and inclusion.
That's correct. And, it's, frankly, we think it's a shame that it requires work just to tell people to be inclusive. I mean, like, are you kidding? I mean, if you peel our skin off, you're black on white, you peel the skin off, it's all, it's bone and muscle underneath, right?
Right.
And, it's so, I don't know, it's funny. It's programming. That's what it is. People grow up in households. You're in cultural programming. These are the things that continue to inundate you through your stages of puberty, all these other massive stages of development. And then when you're on your own, it's like, man, why is it still stuck in people's heads like that you need to view the world through this lens? Why can't you just view it with that equality?
Yeah, it's. I wish I had a definitive answer as to the why. One of the things that I remember studying in persuasion was that it takes different things to motivate people to move and to act on things. And you would think that having the discussion about diversity and inclusion, like you should do it because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
But depending on your programming and what motivates you and what triggers you to act, the conversation is going to look a little different. And I know that for a lot of my work, it comes down to, well, what does it mean for me, dollars and cents?
Mm.
What does it mean for my bottom line, my impact? And one of the most strongest things that I tell people who have that kind of mindset is that if you are a business that is operating now in any way, shape, or form, not having a diversity and inclusion discussion is going to hurt you in the long run. They've done countless studies, time and time again, that have pretty much proven that companies that have diverse workers, not just on race and gender, but diversity of thought, diversity of age, diversity of experiences, do far better from a financial standpoint than the ones that just have homogenous groups.
Do you know, um, think about Warren Buffett. What does he say? Diversify. That's what creates the longevity in a portfolio. Why the hell would you not do the same thing with the human beings in your business? The people that support the actions. That seems pretty obvious. If you didn't care at all about human rights or looking at people equally, and you can just be like, well, I should diversify from strictly a quantitative sense, that just seems obvious, does it not?
Yeah, it does.
So then, all right, we can just sit here and talk about the obvious all day. Then I got to ask you then, Susanne, what is it that is the incentive driver for you? If you're saying it's dollar and cents for some people, which I frankly think is a shame, what is it for you that is that driver? What's the thing that incentivizes you to have that story and say, I've make that decision within my own mind?
For me, it's watching the next generation be far more successful than me.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing people get to places where I know that they've been struggling, I know that they've been working hard, they've been putting in the work, making the connections, and doing all that they can just to be successful. And then seeing that metamorphosis from being a novice to being this successful person in their own right, with their own sense of agency over their career, with bright prospects, making wealth not only for themselves but for their generation, because for many women of color, generational wealth is not even it's not even talked about, let alone personal wealth. So being able to see that with people that I mentor, with people that have read the book, that's what does it for me.
Yeah, and Susanne, you had in your book, which has a ton of data in it, which I appreciate.
Yeah,
and
shout
love
out
that.
to all the data in the Character book, by the way. Yeah.
But you had a statistic in there on computing professions have remained stagnant at 25%, while women make up nearly 60% of the total U.S. workforce. Why do you think that is, especially in the tech industry?
Oh, there's so many reasons, and unfortunately, I think the pandemic actually exacerbated a few of these issues. So there's things that we commonly talk about, the biases and the microaggressions that tend to happen in the day to day, not getting the support in the academic field to make that leap from academic to the professional world. But then when you couple in the pandemic, there's actually women who are losing because they also have child rearing, obligations, as well as other obligations within the household. In fact, I saw a recent study that said that women, and it didn't matter what industry it was, but women last year suffered greatly in terms of mobility and job opportunities
Mm.
from last year alone. and it's going to take some time for them to get back up. So I tell people it's not just one thing that's causing this to happen. It's many things that happen in in the community, in academics, and in the professional realm that kind of contribute to that lack of representation.
Those numbers. I mean, if you have a dynamic problem, you need to meet it with a dynamic solution, right? It's like
Exactly.
if someone's coming to you to say, "Oh, I want to move my business up to the cloud," and you're like, "Well, great, move it up to the cloud." Wouldn't it be nice if it was that simple, right?
I
There's
wish it were that simple.
everybody
I
has
really
their
do.
own dynamic thing that's going on. Oh, we need to be compliant with HIPAA, so I need you guys to hit all these earmarks. How's it stored? Where's the encryption? How's the access? How's the root system? All these other things that you have to go through, and you have to meet that dynamically. It requires that listening ear and understanding all the aspects of it, so that you don't just come in and say, "Oh, I have the solution from one sort of polarized angle." It's like, how do we actually look at this in total, holistically, for what it really is? And I want to
Yes.
use something as an example here. And then let's keep carrying this thought forward. I know you're ready to answer because you're excited.
Well, no, it's funny that you say that because in my work a lot, it's that I want to move to the cloud.
Mhm.
Great. Have you thought about X? Have you thought about Y? Have you thought about cloud security? Have you thought,
Yes.
and are you even culturally ready to move to cloud? It's
That's
like, it's not just a technical conversation. Like, do you have the right mindset to do this?
bang, right there. What you just said. See that? Do you have the right mindset? So whether it is I'm moving someone to the cloud in their company, or I'm trying to stop someone from being a racist in tech, it requires a mindset. Before anything else happens, it's the perspective of that individual. And I would like to use something that's a near and dear example to you. You work for Microsoft.
Yes.
Microsoft hired you. Talk to us about Microsoft's diversity, inclusion, all those other things, and how they're actually helping you champion what you're doing. The fact that you're on here, you know, outside of anything else that you do, the fact that they let you speak in engagements outside of the work of moving people to the cloud is an incredible thing. Talk to us about how they, in their culture, in the Microsoft perspective, has adopted this sort of aspect of reality.
Yeah, one of the things that I really do love about working for Microsoft is that diversity and inclusion isn't just a buzzword. They know that they have to work at it. They know that they have to have hard conversations. They know, and that requires everyone, not just myself, leading those conversations. It takes, allies and senior leadership to say, no, this is a strategic imperative, and we all need to commit to doing this. So I love that about Microsoft. And when I joined, I remember my boss was just like, whatever you need, in terms of if it's for your book or for your diversity and inclusion efforts, know that you
Mm.
110% have my support and you have Microsoft support as well. And that was so refreshing because I know that for some people, unfortunately, that do a lot of this work, it's kind of an either or type of thing. Like you kind of have the support, but not really. Like do that on your own
Mm.
time, take vacation time for that or use your own resources. Whereas Microsoft's like, no, this is important for our work. While we're a technology company, we're only as good as the diverse people that we're bringing in. And it's been fantastic.
Yeah, you used two words which I think is interesting, and I kind of want to get into this a little bit. You said hard conversations. And that's something I especially in the tech world, it's like everybody's so busy,
Mhm.
and they're just doing what does that look like? We have a lot of tech leaders that listen to this podcast. Having a hard conversations, can you get into that a little bit more and how that can happen? Because I think there's a bravery aspect to that too.
There is, and it's funny when everything was happening last year because of all of the social unrest with the death of Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd. There were a lot of conversations that I was having with a lot of my white male colleagues, And so I like that you said bravery, because I think that there was a little bit of trepidation to even engage in the conversation of like, well, why is Black Lives Matter happening? Why do you support this? And the reason I say bravery is because a lot of people tend to shy away from it because they don't want to offend, or they're scared of having the conversation. And I applauded that, because I'm like, these are the conversations that are necessary in order for us to move forward together. As uncomfortable as may be for that person or for myself, we have to engage in the dialogue to move that forward. And we also need to remember, we're all coming from different places. I tell people often that as a Black woman that grew up in Brooklyn, relatively, lower middle class, I don't expect you to share my experiences, or to think that how I think. But I do hope that as, a person that says that you're a colleague or an ally, that you'll listen, and that you'll educate yourself, and that we keep having the conversation.
Yeah, because when you continue to have that conversation, when you continue to look at the data and not ignore it, you begin to integrate with the truth. But if we shy away and there's too much trepidation around these things, and people are like, "Oh, I'm uncomfortable, or I haven't learned enough about it to speak about it." Well, bring up the fact that you haven't learned a little bit about it. Go meet with people that live with this every single day. Have those conversations. Don't be scared to learn. Don't be scared to actually confront the data and be like, wow, this is an actual problem. Outside of what the news might tell you or anything else, or what you might read on Facebook, there is legitimate data that says this is an issue. And for me, it doesn't matter, who the person might be that it's occurring to. It's the fact that it's a human life. And we should not shy away from data that is having a negative effect on human life. And if
Exactly.
that's one that boils down to profiling people because of the color of their skin, or where they are, or limiting the amount of access they have to education, moving themselves through STEM, or even a cultural bias that says, you shouldn't even go in that path. You shouldn't even consider it. You should consider playing football instead of actually taking the path of STEM. And people think there's a higher odds of getting in the NFL than actually getting a degree in science, technology, education, engineering, or mathematics. We need to
Unfortunately.
look at that data, because things are distorted, and we need to confront that. Don't sell people on pipe dreams or have them ignore what the real issues are. Let's talk about these issues. Talking about it are the first steps towards recognition and the change in the mindset. Because when that
Exactly.
mindset changes, we can become more inclusive. And Jason and I have seen this. We've talked about, stuff that even Amnesty International speaks about.
Yeah, I think it was in New York.
Yeah, it was specifically in New York with the NYPD police cameras and the algorithms. The
Mm-hmm.
algorithms were written with a racial bias internally. The computer, this, does not care about anything. It is a
No.
computer. It's agnostic. It doesn't matter. It's just observing. But if you tell it to look for certain things, it will look for it. And it's like, even in these aspects where it's like, oh, we want to enhance security, what you've done is you've written an algorithm that perpetuates a certain bias rather than looks at it from an inclusive aspect. And so you have facial recognition that's profiling people left and right. Like, it shouldn't be like that. There's no reason for that. But the thing is, no one was confronting that data. No one was speaking about it. And it's whether the programmer knew it or not, it was there. And so we
Yep.
need to continue to even educate the smartest people that are writing algorithms to say, hey, there's a bias in this. Even though you've done a great job being efficient at profiling, whether it's a
Mm-hmm.
good person or a bad person, you've missed the aspect that it's a human being on the other end.
Exactly. And I think the important thing to remember, that these conversations are not, I never paint these conversations as trying to vilify
No.
like anyone, or put someone in a box, or to have them be labeled. It's more of having the honest discussion that these things happen. Like you were talking about biases, the fact that we use AI so frequently for many of the things that we do, with whether it's finances or legal or whatever the case may be. And when you have homogenous groups kind of making these solutions, you're going to have the same unintended effect of continuing to marginalize certain communities. And that's where I'm coming from. It's more so just having you understand, where the perspective and where it's coming from and how you can help, versus I want to paint, a particular group or a particular person to be bad guys, because I don't think that's helpful either. That's not, because the only way that we're going to be able to move forward is if we talk together and move forward together.
We'll talk about bridge building. You love that.
Yes, and it's number 2 in our big 7.
Yeah,
that we support educational access.
Yeah, and human rights is number 3, right? So we have these in progression. It's climate stability, and then we have educational access and human rights. And changing the perspective, having the conversation, doing the mindset, that in and of itself, having a conversation is access to education. When we talk to one another, even the 3 of us here, we're learning something. So it doesn't even have to be in the formal setting of a school. Educational access is just opening up the thing to understand, oh, here's another human being. Let me listen to their opinions. Let me listen to how they think, what they have to say. That is in itself educational access.
And Susan, can you get into the Suzanne, sorry, into the
get it straight.
I know, yeah.
Suzanne, A-N-A.
I said that at the beginning of the show.
Do not worry. So my mother's name was Susan, so like I've been used to it all my life.
Wait a minute,
especially because of the way how it's spelled.
Do you have any children?
I don't.
I'm sensing it was Susan to Suzanne to Susanna. And then Susanna and Anna. You know what I mean? As the progression goes down the line.
But I mean,
that's just cruel. That's just cruel.
So Suzanne, in your book, you talk about early childhood, and you get into a story with a teacher. Can you kind of get into that a little bit, especially with women of color? Because I think this is really important, the educational access part of it.
Yeah. So, and I kind of remember it kind of clearly when I was in grade school. That sometimes teachers don't realize that they have these inherent biases when they're interacting with people, and how that can have an effect on whether or not you actually go ahead and pursue something. So I remember very vividly the math teacher, where I got a 98 on my exam, and the word, instead of saying nice job or excellent, it was careless. I'm like, okay. It's like, go on.
I need you to give me his address off there.
Did you forget to put like a negative or something like that?
I am going to go find him.
Because last time I checked, I thought 98 out of 100 was pretty good, but apparently it was very careless. And so I say this to say that sometimes teachers don't realize how much of a profound impact they're going to have on students, and whether or not they're going to pursue something. I'll be very candid in that when I went back to school at Northwestern, I took a Java programming class.
By the way, congratulations, fantastic university. I mean,
it is. Go Wildcats! I love.
There we go. A little shout out.
But I remember very vividly. I never envisioned being a programmer in any way, shape, or form. It was more about understanding and learning, the language, understanding, what programmers do. And the professor that I had was, let's just say, like, she was the type of person where she'd reach in, grab your heart, and laugh at you all in the same breath. And I'm like, oh, okay. And she wasn't the most encouraging person. And I'm like, I'm glad that I had the wherewithal to know that that wasn't the career path that I wanted, because if I had listened to her guidance, that then it never would have happened. And unfortunately, her class was a required class for my major, and I heard that a lot of my colleagues ended up dropping the major altogether because they didn't want to deal with her.
Makes sense.
And I'm like, that's insane. That's insane.
Actually, you coined it as unfortunate, and I'm going to throw this back at you, and I'm going to say it's actually rather fortunate. Even though the event is negative, perceived negative, something was learned. You knew how you didn't want to act. You knew how you didn't want to treat people, and you knew where you needed to appropriate your focus. But you probably wouldn't have known that if you hadn't met that lady.
Yeah, for
Can you
sure.
say? Yeah.
That's true. That is absolutely true. But I just do find it unfortunate that teachers really, I think sometimes they underestimate the power and influence that they have, and
Yes.
to be very careful, about that. I realize teaching is a stressful job. It's hard. And I have a healthy respect for all educators. But you do have to be mindful that, the very, trajectory of this person's career, at times is in your hands, and guidance guidance and nurturing is going to be something that's going to be very, very important.
I always state that there are 3 gurus we have in our life. And I think I came up with this originally. What do I know? The first one is going to be your parents. Those are your first gurus. Those are the ones you look up to. They teach you what, you need to know, how to walk, talk, act, do all these things, whether it's right or wrong. The second guru are going to be your professors, whether it's the ones you have in high school or the ones you find when you go to university, right? So, okay, I've learned as much as I could from my parents. Now I'm taking the next step. I'm going to learn from the people that are specialists in these things they speak of. And then from that, it's either they taught me things that were right or they taught me things that were wrong. But then I'm left with the last guru. And who do you think that is, Susanne?
Who is the last guru?
You're the last guru. And you prove that point by saying, I heard from her. I understood what wasn't correct. Now it's time I need to listen to myself. Now it's time I need to read my book, adopt my skills, and help teach myself with my own self-awareness about the path I need to follow. And again, you have nailed all 3 of those steps, all 3 of those stages of learning. And that level of self-awareness, you taking that path of learning that code, having to learn a language, opens up your ear to hear about others, to learn from their perspective. There's a certain syntax or constraints that sit into a programming language. That's the same thing like saying when I go to a certain individual, they're programmed a certain way. What is their syntax? What are
Right.
their constraints in their reality that they live within? And I think it's afforded you that flexibility of mind in your own learning so that you could apply it to actually have the patience to write this book, to champion these things that are important because you've become that guru now for others. And so they can then take that next step and be like, I can be my own best self. And then you get this beautiful bifurcation of efforts where the actual thought power of which you were thinking has now been doubled in a positive aspect for humanity, in a positive access for human rights, in the application of equality and everybody else that could get access to this sort of education so that we can evolve. Because when we limit these opportunities just because of the way someone looks or because we're reinforcing a cultural bias, we stop the evolution of every single human being on this planet. And it is impossible for us to tell until that person has lived their life and completely left this earth what probability of impact they could have had. And if we limit those probabilities, we limit the growth for humankind. And so what you're doing is a straightforward, well-spotlighted example of what it means to be a human being and increase those probabilities for all.
No, thank you. I mean, I'm truly touched, and I feel like if I can make an impact on anyone, or help anyone, that's always kind of been my guiding principle. It's funny. I did a speaking event recently, and one of the things I touched on is that I often wonder, you know, what we've missed out on in terms of, the future tech leaders that we're never going to meet, or the innovations that we're never going to see from Black women, technologists, all because they didn't have access to opportunity, or they didn't have that support, or they didn't have that mentorship, whatever it looks like. I just feel like there's so many missed opportunities that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing is, I want to minimize as many missed opportunities as I possibly can, because I like, just in the writing of the book, I had the pleasure of getting to meet people who were just starting their own tech careers, and people who've been in it for decades, and their stories and what they've shared. It was wonderful, and it was beautiful. And and I want that for anybody, not just women of color, but anybody that wants to have a fruitful tech career, just having that access, having that information, and not being limited by, things that you shouldn't be limited by.
Right.
Yeah. Last question. You talk in the book about there's an entire pipeline of bringing women of color into tech. And then you talk about there's significant leaks in the pipes. Can you go into those leaks in the pipes and then go into what we can do as humans and then as corporations and governments to fix those?
Well, so it actually does start at home. And I think sometimes what ends up happening is, sometimes parents may not necessarily know how to support girls, in their STEM careers. Some of the studies that I looked at actually said that parents are more inclined to help boys with their, math and science homework than they are for girls, and helping them pursue that.
Interesting.
So I really do think that it is incumbent on the community to start there and start building those blocks of saying, if this is what you want to do, you can. And although we may not have the answers, we'll support you. The same thing with academics, reducing those cultural biases against girls in STEM courses, making it more affordable for people to go and get education, which is usually the biggest hindrance between the time that you're in academics to the time you get in the career field. And then in the field itself, making sure that you have sound recruiting practices, that you're looking at different places to find talent, not just the Northwesterns or the Ivies of the world, but historically Black colleges and universities, boot camps, a number of other professional organizations that cater to underrepresented communities. I think that's important as well. And then to me, the most important piece, making sure that you're building the environment for people to be successful and to want to stay where they are and contribute. Because once someone feels safe, once they feel like they're able to bring their best selves to work, the effect that it has in terms of them wanting to help others and wanting to bring in others is exponential. So that's, for me, that's really key, not just the diversity portion, but the inclusion portion as well.
That's incredible. And you run marathons. And if you think about
I used to.
No, it doesn't matter. Let's run with don't say anything. Quiet. Let's run with this. The original history of running the marathon, they would carry the torch. They still do it in the Olympics, right? You are running your own marathon. And you are carrying your own torch. And you are setting that blazing path where it needs to go. And you're bringing light to where there is darkness. I sincerely congratulate you. I champion you. And if there's any way we can help support any of the nonprofits that you're doing work for, we would love to have them listed on our marketplace so people in 222 countries across the globe can also share and help elevate the journey of others and have an impact far beyond just their, current locale.
I would love that. There are several organizations that I do a lot of work with, and they do it, freely, and I had an opportunity to meet some of the students in these programs, and it's the work that they do is phenomenal, and I know that they always welcome support of any kind. So thank you.
Okay, awesome. Well, listen, don't tell Microsoft how much time you're going to spend playing Final Fantasy today. Oh, that's amazing. All right. Well, listen, Susanne, thank you very much. We're always here. Please, if you want to come back on and join, you have a wonderful story, and there's so much more that we can talk about, and we are just barely scratching the surface.
Yes, thank you.
It's my pleasure.